Good morning. My name's Mark Brown. I'm from TG Escapes. We produce eco buildings throughout education for classrooms, chapels, canteens, all sorts, as I'll come on to talk about later. If you have any questions, then please put them in the chat function, and I'll be happy to answer them as we go. And what I'm going to talk about today is how modular eco buildings can be something to consider when finding ways to ease pressure on classroom size in the current climate with the additional needs for social distancing and hygiene. So to start off, we, as I say, we produce eco classrooms on a modular system. And this means that you can have additional space put into your educational setting much more quickly than traditional builds in a sustainable manner, and you can save money in the long term. So there are a number of advantages when looking at this type of building solution. And that's what I'm going to run through today, is some of the benefits and looking specifically at some case studies and some research that we have from our customers in education, and how they find the buildings work for them, and provide different spaces to use in their educational setting. So a modular process, you might have heard of modular buildings. Broadly speaking, there are two types. There's something called volumetric, which is the buildings which are craned in modules. And there's a system such as ours, which is systematic, which are modules that are manufactured in the factory, then pieced together on site. Now, when you compare a modular classroom build such as this to a traditional classroom build, what you can see is that using timber frame construction methods like this saves a significant amount of time, because the building can be manufactured in the warehouse, in the factory, whilst site preparation and groundwork is going on, which means that you can have a building erected much quicker than a traditional approach. Not only that, but it's not only saving time, but it also reduces wastage and transportation energy, because you can transport exactly what you need to site. You can keep things safe in the factory before you need it, and you've got less weight actually with timber frame to be transported around the roads. So we're big fans of timber, and we think that timber really needs to be rediscovered as a modern method of construction. And that's because it's the only material grown for construction that is truly sustainable. And with the certification that's available, 97% of all timber in Europe is registered under FSC and PEFC schemes. Timber uses far less energy to harvest and manufacture than alternative building materials. And it's a carbon sink, so it basically captures carbon, releases oxygen, improves air quality over its 60-year life cycle. And it weighs 20% of the weight of concrete and 6% of steel, and it looks and feels much warmer. So it brings with it a lot of benefits, and that has some real implications in education settings, as I'll come on to talk about. And when you look at the CO2 produced by steel, concrete, and timber, you can see that timber is, by a long way, much more efficient and less environmentally damaging than either concrete or steel. It actually locks up CO2, so it's a carbon sink. And it's the oldest building material known to mankind. People have been building with timber since construction began, but it's also the kindest. So it's far less polluting to water than concrete or steel, less fossil fuel consumption, and less smog being produced, and that's according to the Athena Eco Calculator. So the first thing is that timber as a construction material is something which should be considered today, because it's much more environmentally friendly than alternatives. So how can these types of buildings help you adapt for current and future needs in your education setting? So with the need for more space in education, we think these standalone buildings can act something like a safety valve. They can provide additional teaching space. They can provide space for other purposes to free up perhaps space in the main building. And by putting these standalone buildings in particular spaces on your site, you can help manage traffic flow around a site. So you can create different flows around the whole education setting. So, for example, these are some buildings which we've provided to show you the way that you could think about using these buildings to alleviate pressure on your setting. This is an example of a building at Shotton Hall Academy. It's a mini school in a way. It has 3 classrooms, a conference room, and offices. So what we've done here is made use of spare space they had in the school grounds to provide something which really stands alone. And if you can imagine how much that relieves pressure in the main building. You could simply put up a double classroom, a simple extra building with 2 classrooms, which is our most popular building, a double classroom. You can perhaps, if you have early years provision, you can create a separate early years setting, such as this one at Colston's Independent School. If you provide performing arts, drama or dance, or in a main hall, then you could think about using a building like this to provide a separate space. In this case, there were twin drama and dance studios at Hendon School, which again alleviates pressure on the main school building and allows the space that was used for those things to be used for other purposes. Another example of that, this is a performing arts studio, a much smaller building that allows the boys at Swalcliffe Park to get out of the main building and to practice performing arts in a dedicated studio. Or perhaps this is a standalone chapel. So again, you could think about a specialist building such as this to alleviate pressure in the main school. Teacher training. We work with a lot of schools who provide teacher training, and we find that these types of buildings can provide separate secure space for teacher training, which means that you don't have teachers from other settings moving around the main building. You can keep everything separate and isolated. Again, relieving pressure on the school, but also enhancing hygiene security. Or perhaps building a separate canteen. So moving, in a lot of schools, we find that the main halls are used for feeding as well as sports or performing arts. So providing a separate canteen separate to the main school is another way of alleviating pressure on space in the main building. Perhaps move a library out, again, alleviating space. And perhaps creating separate changing facilities so that the sports facilities that in the main building can be repurposed for educational use or perhaps staff rooms or the like. So there's lots of ways that these buildings can be used, and another is for special education needs. So we find that we work with a lot of education establishments where they need SEND provision, and these buildings work incredibly well for that as a standalone, separate, secure space. They provide a much more calming environment. Or if you've got enough space, they can be very large buildings providing provision for, in this case, 600 students. This was a building built in 3 phases, so funding was available across a number of years, and the building was constructed in 3 stages over that time. So they can be large provision as well, providing an awful lot of extra space for students. So those are just some examples of how buildings can use space you have in the grounds to alleviate pressure on the main school. But when thinking about designing a new building, you now need to think about space planning and infection control. And this really varies by age and special needs, and actually guidance is changing all the time at the moment. So it's something that you need to keep on top of. But social distancing requirements should really be considered at design stage, because by building the thinking into the design, you can really help moving forward. You can think about flexible partitions, allowing for different spaces for different needs. A lot of our buildings use decking and canopies, which provides flexible outdoor space, and we think use of the outdoors is something which is going to be increasingly important. You can also build multiple access points into these buildings, so you can you can help student flow around the building and to and from the building from other buildings on the educational setting. And you can think about hand hygiene toilets, so you can build in hand washing facilities, hand hygiene facilities into a lobby area. You can have separate toilets designed into the classroom spaces to prevent cross-contamination. You can future-proof by thinking about cleanliness, so you can finish interiors with easy-to-clean materials such as white rock and vinyl floors. Air circulation is incredibly important, so adaptive ventilation provides really good air quality and could be fitted with hygienic filters. So if you've got a need for extra space, the question is, what solution is right for your school? Should you consider traditional builds versus a modular build? Should you think about volumetric? Should you think about the timber system? These are the comparisons that anybody looking at additional space needs to consider. So some of the benefits that we find that timber provide, we think that timber has a great benefit to educational outcomes and well-being. It can create environments that increase people's willingness to learn and improve results and the aspirations of pupils. And it can have a long-term positive impact on the health of pupils and teachers, reducing burnout. And I'm going to explain what we've found about that. So we all know that a well-designed space helps us feel great. We know that when you're in a good space, it affects how you feel and how you perform. So when you have a building which is designed to blend with its surroundings, following the principles of biophilic design, which are incorporating natural elements, providing easy access to the outdoors, using materials and textures that reflect those in nature, maximizing the penetration exposure to natural light, provide a healthy level of interior air quality, and providing views of the natural world outside, the buildings feel very different from a traditional build. And this we find is good for staff and student well-being, and the research that we conduct amongst our customers demonstrates this is so. It's also great for encouraging outdoor learning and environmental citizenship, because you can provide easy access to the outdoors through floor-to-ceiling doors, lots of access points, covered areas. Now, this was an interesting study conducted by Weitzer Parkett that wanted to look at how timber buildings performed in education versus traditional buildings. So the idea was to demonstrate the advantages of using timber within a classroom and its long-term benefits to students who study within the timber classrooms. And what was interesting was that when you compare, this is one of the findings, this is the key finding, when you compare the heart rates of students in a standard classroom versus those in a timber classroom, what they found was over the course of the school day that the students in the timber classroom had 8,500 heartbeats less per day. So the conclusion was that the timber provided a different type of environment that was somewhat less stressful, somewhat more calming. And it's long been known that connecting with nature improves educational outcomes, and this is a couple of studies that have been conducted which demonstrate that. So Heshong Mahor group amongst 21,000 students showed that larger windows increased progress in mathematics by 15% and reading by 23%. A study in 2008 showed that just having natural views of the world outside produced higher test scores, higher graduation rates, more planning to attend college, and fewer reports of criminal behaviour. And also, connecting with nature enhances development. So this is a study conducted in 2007, and it showed that children exposed to nature scored higher on concentration and self-discipline, improved awareness, reasoning and observational skills, were better at reading, writing, maths, science and social studies, better at working in teams, and showed improved behaviour overall. There's also an opportunity to build in environmental citizenship into these types of buildings. So when you have a project which is using natural materials on a timber frame, It's a great opportunity to engage students in sustainability and all things environmental. At Teachscapes, we add to this by providing a tree planting scheme, which goes some way towards offsetting some of the carbon, but more importantly, we provide these forests to customers so that students can adopt their own trees. And you can see here, we work with a company called EcoMatcher, and it allows the students to adopt their own trees and travel and chat to them and understand a bit about the farmers and their families who planted the trees, look at how much carbon's being offset, and they can even chat to the tree on an app, which is a great way to engage them in sustainability and get them thinking about these bigger issues. So this is now some of the research that we've conducted and some of the feedback we get from customers who are working with these buildings day in, day out. This one is a setting at Bickley Park School, who have two buildings from Teachscapes there. This is their first building, which was an early years setting. Both children and staff love learning and working in the building due to the amount of natural light and space. Free flow access to a covered deck is a huge advantage so that outdoor learning can take place in all weathers. We've seen a big improvement in their behaviour. They're much calmer, something we think may be due to the natural light they have, which was not available in the previous room. And this is a nursery setting in Cardiff. This is a building that's been around for a number of years now. Giving the children a new setting to learn in has had a big impact on their motivation. Working amongst natural surroundings has enhanced the imagination and creativity. Talking to the pupils about the eco-friendly features has been a great way to teach them about sustainability and the environment. Our pupils feel valued and like the roominess and light of their new learning space. The Cedar building also has a warmth that is hard to put into words, but basically they feel comfortable. We find that a lot of customers find the buildings feel very, very different. Sometimes it's difficult to put your finger on exactly what it is about them that's different. The environment seems settled and calm. Children are able to focus on learning, very positive impact on staff well-being. So just some examples of some research that we've had from customers. But added to that, these buildings can significantly reduce running costs. The use of smart lighting, solar PV, sun pipes, living roofs, which helps with water runoff, adaptive ventilation, air source heating and hot water. This allows these buildings to be designed to be net zero in operation. So when thinking about a building, it's going to be increasingly important, especially with energy taxes coming up at some time in the future, thinking about a building that's going to be energy efficient to run and hopefully be net zero in the way that it's used. And when you look at how energy is used across the life of a commercial building, what you see is that the actual energy used in construction is a very significant part in the early years. But of course, over the course of a lifetime, then the cost of lighting and hot water and heating and cooling become a much more significant part of the overall lifetime energy cost. So research that was conducted by Passive House Trust and Ruth Butler Architects demonstrated that by investing perhaps an additional 20% in the initial design and construction of a building, you can reduce operational costs by as much as 50%. So a 20% investment in design and construction can reduce your lifetime operational costs by as much as 50%. So again, coming back to our research, both children and staff have really enjoyed working in this lovely new classroom with easy access to the outdoors for play. A welcome bonus is that we've saved significantly on energy costs. The clever features of our building have greatly reduced our energy bills and are easy to take care of. We're able to use elements of the eco-friendly design to teach our children about environmental citizenship. So to sum up, these types of buildings using a systematic modular timber frame system can be delivered quickly. The smaller buildings, we can be on site in as little as 6 weeks. They can be delivered quickly. They can make a big difference to an educational setting because they can provide different types of spaces that feel very different for students and staff, enhance educational outcomes, enhance their well-being. So when thinking about the pressures that you may be facing now and your hygiene routines that need to be installed into day-to-day life, creating extra space that allows different flow through the school, control of students in and out of buildings is worth considering. So just to finish off, TG Escapes and our educational mission, we want to invest in the future of children, society and the planet by providing educators with buildings that connect to nature, improving education outcomes and mental well-being, save energy so that energy costs are reallocated to education, are cheaper, quicker and less disruptive to build. One thing that I didn't talk about was the fact that these buildings can be self-contained when in construction, so you can carry on with education in the rest of the site as normal. We're also planting forests on behalf of our customers to engage students in sustainability and offset a proportion of the carbon footprint, and we're working towards being a net zero company. So that's all from me. Thank you for your time today. I hope that's been useful. And obviously, if there's any further questions, then I'd be happy to take that by visiting our website. You can find more information or info@tgescapes.co.uk. Thank you very much.